Hello everybody, my name is Nothrar, and welcome in to a video about Final Fantasy XIV. Just wanted to go ahead and share some tips and tricks for anybody that may be joining in on the game following the big kerfuffle with Blizzard, or maybe you're just trying the game out for the first time. I don't know your life. But there are quite a few confusing things that people come into contact with. Just a couple of questions that I've been asked just offhand by some close friends and some newer players that join in the free company for the first time that I'm a part of. To give you a little background on myself, I've been playing this game since the release of A Realm Reborn. Played it all the way back on the PlayStation 3. I've been a raid leader since about Heaven's Ward. Took a little break from it from Stormblood and went back in it at the start of Shadowbringers. And I'm looking forward to Endwalker. Definitely not going to be doing raid leading anymore, though. Can't do that. But just wanted to go ahead and fill you guys in on a couple of things here. So right now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start a brand new character, just so I can kind of walk you through some of the things here, some of the questions that I have received when making a new character. First thing to take note of, this isn't really common in MMOs anymore, but race, gender does not matter. If you're coming from Blizzard, I know that you have racial traits and racial abilities that you can use as well. There's something like that in Final Fantasy XIV. Any character that you make will all do the same things and have access to all the same content as another character. So don't feel like by choosing a character that you're locking yourself out of content. The only thing that I know that is specific to a race is there are some smaller buildings that are in Shadowbringers. I only know of one where you can only access them from a Lalafell, but there's nothing in there that's amazing or anything like that. It's just specific content that you can go with Lalafell. If that's something that you feel like you don't want to be let out, kept out on, rather, then definitely go ahead and play as a Lalafell, but probably don't want to play this short race. Just gonna throw that out there right now. That's up to you, man. But any race, any gender, no matter what you choose, is all going to be the same. Hrothgar and Viera, if you have access to both of these races, believe that you get these whenever you purchase Shadowbringers. Hrothgar and Viera are both gender locked. Hrothgars are male, Vieras are female. There are going to be female Hrothgar and male Viera. Male Viera has already been confirmed by the dev team, and they did say at the same time that they do want to go ahead and make female Hrothgar as well. They're just not in the game yet. Male Viera, I do believe, is coming with Endwalker, though. So if you want to play a male bunny, you gotta wait till Endwalker comes out. But other than that, let's go ahead and let's get started with a couple of other things here. Let's go ahead and just be basic. Let's just go ahead and just start with a cure, which is just human. Every single race in the game has two different clans that they can choose to be a part of. This just only influences aesthetics. Typically, there will be a lighter skinned type of character, and there will be a darker skinned type of character that is available as a preset. You can change stuff after that happens, but for the most part, this just determines whether or not you want to be a much lighter skin tone or a darker skin tone. That is all of that influences. It does state over here on the side, if you look over to the right, that your starting attributes are different depending on which clan that you start of. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you right now, the starting attributes do not matter. They are so insignificant. They are one or two out of a specific stat for most of them. And that is not going to influence your damage potential. That's not going to influence anything in a major way. If anything, it's going to be a percent of a percent. So don't ever think that this is going to be something that you have to pick to be competitive at endgame. As long as you can dodge AoEs, you're set, dude. Just practice on improving yourself as a player. Do not worry about the base skills that you start off with as a specific race. Okay? So we go ahead, we go a little bit further. There are quite a few options that are here. One question that I was asked is, does height and weight, or like how bulky you are, matter? No, for the most part. Uh, there is a race. I'll go ahead and I'll just back all the way out. Go ahead and start making a new character. There is a Rogadin. Rogadins are big. Really, really big. Lalafels, really, really small. This does not influence defensive stats. This does not influence any type of hidden stat, any type of like aggro radius, anything of that nature. It all comes down to personal preference. If you are taller, it does not mean that you are going to hit your head on something and be, you know, at a disadvantage when going through like corridors and stuff like that. Any character, no matter how big they are, can always fit through a corridor. So don't ever think that you have to worry about your size as a character. It's just not going to influence anything as far as gameplay is concerned. It's all about aesthetics. How do you want your character to look? What do you want your reflection in Eorzea to be? Is basically what I'll leave you with that. As far as the fashion in-game goes, I will go ahead and say that there are more options available as far as fashion is concerned to female characters. So if fashion is what you want to focus on, definitely look into those fashion options before you make your choice. You can always Fantasia later, but it does cost in real life money. So just keep that in mind. You do get a free Fantasia at the end of A Realm Reborn. So if you can make it with a male character and you suddenly want to switch over to a female character, wait until the end of A Realm Reborn. It's really not that long ever since they made the quest changes to it. And you'll be able to change your character's race, whatever you want to do at that time. But none of this really matters. I'm just going to go ahead and just go with basic Andy over here, because really does not matter for the purposes of this demonstration here. Appearance data. Anytime that you make a character and you get finished making a character, you can go ahead and you can save appearance data. You have a certain number of slave slots that you can have. Do not worry about running out. You have 40 of them. Unless you want to make 40 different characters, I think you're good. But all this influences is, let's say that you Fantasia, right? Let's say that you go ahead and you want to change your character's appearance. This just lets you load up a appearance right off rip. That way you've already made a character, and you can just go ahead and save that character appearance. You can actually go ahead and save character appearance and not make a character. So if you just want to go into the character creator and just make a bunch of different character presets, you can go ahead and you can do that if that's your thing. But if you want to save your character, like your created character, it will give you an option to do so. If you don't, just go ahead and hit no. If you hit back, so if you hit escape or if you hit circle on controller, it will go ahead and back out if you hit yes by accident when you wanted to say no. I'm just going to go ahead and say no. Eorzean calendar. This does not influence anything. This is just specifically for character flavor. If you want to do roleplay, things of that nature, this lets you know when your character's birthday was. That's all that's there for. You don't get any special bonuses on your birthday. You don't get like a present or anything like that on your birthday. Uh, this just is something that is there specifically for roleplay purposes. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and set it as my actual birthday. And we'll just go on here. Patron deities. Again, specifically for a roleplay flavor. Back in the day, if you look through older guides, this did used to influence what your elemental resistances are. Elemental resistances are no longer a thing. And even back then, they really weren't even really that much of a thing. So this, again, is just specifically for roleplay flavor. If you want your character to be a warrior, Halone is a great choice. She is the goddess of war. Ralger is another great one. He's the god of destruction. If you want your character to be more of a rogue type character, Nimia is the goddess of fate. Menfina is the goddess of love. So if you want to go for something like a lovesick rogue, like a bard, that sort of thing, just giving you some ideas about what this really entails. This is just simply for roleplay flavor. We're going to go ahead and stick with alone. Now, this is something that is somewhat important, but it really depends on how you as a player want to progress. Let's say you have friends that are also joining in on the game with you. You will all go to every single one of the starter areas after a certain point in the story. It takes, I think, until about level 15 to do so. So it is going to take a little bit of time for you to get to that point. Not much time, but a little bit of time, to where if you just wanted to start out with everybody and play with your friends right off rip, this is something that is going to influence that. So this is your starting class. Your class is something that determines what role in combat that you will play, and depending on what class you pick will also determine what your starting city is. Every single starting city has a unique cutscene. Every single starting city has its own unique storyline to start off with, but you will be intermingled with every single one of the starting areas after a certain point in the story. Now, just to go ahead and roughly touch on what all the classes do really quick. Gladiator is a tank. Gladiator is a sword and board tank. They switch over into their job, which is different from my class. We'll go ahead and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Gladiator starts off as Gladiator, and then after level 30, they become a Paladin, which means that they still keep their sword and their shield, but it just means that they also get to cast a little bit of magic along as well with the tank class. They're a very defensive tank. They are the very beginner-friendly type of tank. You use your mitigation when it's off cooldown, and you have a block mechanic that is there as well to kind of mitigate some of that damage. Whereas other tanks have parry, you have block, which mitigates more damage. And there's also a block value that's on your shields as well. Pugilist is a DPS. If you want to punch stuff, play Pugilist. You go and you turn your job into a monk once you hit 30, which means that you become a lot more martial artist focused rather than a street brawler type focus with Pugilist. They are exceptionally good at doing a lot of damage extremely quickly, but they do have to hit something that is called positionals. There is the flank and there is the rear for your positionals. There is a stipulation with every single one of their moves that they have. You have to either hit them from the rear or the flank to be able to get the most damage out of the pugilist possible. So there's going to be a lot of movements, a lot of fast moving combos. Your GCD becomes a lot lower than the rest of the classes as you level up, which means that if you want fast paced combat, you want to play pugilist. That's really all there is to say about pugilist. Just go out there and hit stuff, man. Marauder is a tank. Now, they start with a two-handed axe. You would think that they're probably going to go off into a DPS type job. They will always be a tank. They are the frontline, big meat shield that does not worry about mitigating blows. Their job, first and foremost, is to hit stuff extremely hard, and if it's dead, it cannot hit them harder. Later on, when they become a warrior, which is what their job becomes, they start focusing on a lot more of their mitigation type abilities, which come in the form of self-healing and mitigating with having a higher health pool than the thing hitting you. So, if you want to drain tank, if you want to hit stuff extremely hard, if you want a unga bunga button that you can hit every few GCDs, warrior is what you want to play. Lancer. Now, Lancer is a DPS job. The thing with Lancer is that there is a meme that goes around that has been confusing a lot of different people. I'm not really sure how, but it is a meme nonetheless. They are known as the floor tank. Now, Lancers have a lot of abilities that lock them in place doing an animation. It's gotten a lot less worse over the years. As you level up, this becomes less of a problem. They are a very positioning dependent DPS, just like Pugilist is, but not to the extremes that Pugilist goes to. But since they do get animation locked, if you animation lock yourself at the wrong time, you will get hit by AoEs and you will probably die, which is why they are known as a floor tank. Uh, do not let that stipulation worry you. They are one of the more favored DPS classes just because they are pretty easy to pick up. They don't really have a lot of positionals that they have to worry about until later on, and their combo is probably one of the longest combos that you have as far as a melee combo is concerned. They're extremely fun to play. They have a lot of damage up close. They have really good raid utility. All around a very good job. So if you want to play a DPS and you want to hit stuff as hard as a Marauder is probably hitting it, play Lancer. Archers. Archers are very unique in their playstyle from the rest of the starting classes that you will play with. The main reason for that is because outside of a melee job, this is the only long range job I believe that you can start off with. Yep, the only long range job that you can start off with that does not have to sit in place to do their damage. As an archer, you can constantly be on the move and constantly be doing damage at the same time, which is something that a lot of people favor when they want to start with a long range job. They don't want to be locked in place casting a spell. They'd rather just be able to move around so that they can actually dodge AoEs and stuff like that. Archer lets you do that. Now, Archer levels up into a Bard at level 30. Bards are very, I'm not going to say difficult, but they are a little bit out there as far as how the rest of the jobs play. They have songs that they need to play and upkeep on, and as you level up and you hit in-game, you're never going to want to let a song drop for whatever reason. Your songs are where your damage comes from. It's where you use a lot of your OGCD abilities that you get, because Bard gets a lot of them, to do the majority of your damage. You're always going to be hitting a button on Archer. You're always going to be doing something as a Bard. You're always going to be throwing out damage, making sure that your dots stay up, making sure that you're using all of your OGCDs whenever they come off cooldown, if they get reset during one of your songs, etc., etc. If you want a very high APM job that is very reliant on their procs, then Archer is what you want to play. Archers are extremely fun, um, but it also is a job that takes a lot of practice to kind of work with. They kind of fall up there with Pugilist as well, whereas Pugilist has a lot of positionals that they have to worry about. Archer just has a lot of management that they have to do with their abilities at a base level. So if you want a harder DPS job that you want to play, you want to flex on your friends, Archer's probably the ones you're going to want to start with, because not only are you going to be able to move more than them if they pick a caster, you're also probably going to have the most bragging rights when it comes to endgame. Let's go ahead and move over to the Disciples of Magic. I didn't really touch on this at the start, but Disciples of War and Magic are two different things. Disciples of War are anything that is physical based. Disciples of Magic are anything that is magical based. Um, if you want to play a caster, you're playing a Disciple of Magic. If you want to play a melee job, you're playing a Disciple of War. That's really kind of what it boils down to. There is specific gear starting off that stipulates Disciple of War, Disciple of Magic. That goes away pretty quickly once you hit the Heaven's Ward expansion, because then it becomes job dependent. But that is something to keep in mind whenever you are first starting out. Is if you're looking at gear upgrades, make sure that it is for your correct disciple. But going into the Disciples of Magic, you have the Conjurer. Conjurers are the healers. This is the only healer that you can play at the start of the game. Arcanist can become a healer, but it does not become a healer until level 30, and we'll get into that because Arcanist is his own beast in and of itself. But Conjurer is your basic, I want to heal people class. You have very few damage spells in your arsenal. You will obtain a ton of abilities that will do healing over time, really big burst healing. Your level 50 ability that you get is called Benediction. It just straight up just fully heals a target to full health on a very short cooldown for considering what it is. And a lot of your abilities and buffs that you get are going to be adding regen or increasing your casting speed so that you can cast heals a lot faster. They turn into a white mage at level 30, and the theme continues with they have a lot of healing over time and a lot of burst healing. They're not really about mitigation healing. They're all about just healing up health that has already been lost and making sure that health pools stay high through their healing over time abilities. They do get one shield mitigation ability, but it is not something that you want to rely on in regards to like other healers. There's also a meme about white mages. They're called the green DPS. Since you have a lot of healing that is off the global cooldown, it means that you can throw out a lot of damage in the time frame that people aren't taking damage. So once you get a pretty good idea of when damage is going to be coming out, you are going to be doing mostly DPSing pretty much throughout your entire career as a white mage. Uh, at first, I would just worry about making sure to keep people alive, but try to throw out damage spells as much as you can to try to get into that flow of combat. Make sure that you've got your dot up on somebody. Make sure that you're throwing out your single target ability on people. You have one of the best AoE abilities in the game because it also stuns everything that it hits. So once you unlock Holy, which is your AoE ability, make sure you spam that in trash pools. Because if your tank's not getting hit, they're not taking damage. So in a way, you're also mitigating damage in that regard. Please do not use Holy on bosses. PSA to any white mage that starts out, please do not Holy a single target. Please and thank you. Thaumaturge. Thaumaturge is your basic mage of the group. Thaumaturge plays a lot differently from every other DPS class in the fact that its damage has stances that they will be going into to do their casting. You have Astral Fire and Umbral Ice. Astral Fire, anytime that you cast a fire spell, it will put you into Astral Fire. Astral Fire makes it to where you cannot regain mana, but it also makes all of your damaging spells hit harder. So you want to make sure that whenever you are dealing damage, that you are not in Umbral Ice. Anytime you cast a fire spell, it will take you out of Umbral Ice and put you into Astral Fire. But starting out, just make sure that whenever you are, when you hit probably about the level 50 range, make sure that you are watching your mana. A lot of black mage is just counting how many spells that you've casted in your damage rotation, and then trying to maximize that as much as possible as soon as you increase your casting speed. Making sure that you're always getting the most out of your damage in your damage phase before you have to jump back into Umbral Ice. Which, segue into Umbral Ice. Umbral Ice makes it to where you regain mana, but you deal less damage. You still deal damage, considerable damage, with your ice abilities. So you don't want to not be casting in Umbral Ice. You always want to be casting something. But Umbral Ice is the form that you stay in if you want to get your mana back up, and then once your mana is immediately full, you want to go back immediately into Astral Fire. So if you want to stance, if you want to be the turret of the group and just blow things up with reckless abandon, Thaumaturge is what you want to start out as. Black mages are hard, y'all. If you stand in an AoE, you are probably dead. They do have a couple of ways to get out of danger's way, but keep in mind that all of your damage is tied to you standing still. So you got to learn where the safe spots are in a fight. That's going to take practice. It is going to be very hard starting off if you have no knowledge of a fight at all, but if you want to play a black mage, you're going to do a ton of damage. People are going to like you if you play black mage well. So it kind of falls into that same category of archer, right? Where you're playing a class that has a bit more of a skill ceiling to reach. So let's go ahead and let's talk about Arcanist. Arcanist starts off as a DPS job. Arcanists are the job that you want to play if you want to segment into either a Scholar or a Summoner. If you've already looked at the classes leading up to this. Arcanist is the only class in the game that can have the option to do two different jobs. Any experience that you gain while leveling Scholar or Summoner will go to the respective other job. So if you hit 80 on Scholar, you also have an 80 Summoner. This is a class that you can pick up if you are not sure if you want to play as a DPS or if you want to play as a healer. You have both of the options available to you. A lot of their damage comes from damage over time abilities and from their pet that they get to summon as an Arcanist. So starting off, you're going to be relying a lot on your dot damage to kind of keep constant damage up. You're going to be worrying about that a lot whenever you go into Summoner as well, but you have a lot of different phases that you jump through as a Summoner. Summoner is a very high skill ceiling uh, DPS job as well. They have the most mobility out of all of the casters that is available to them because they have an instant cast damage ability that they can throw in between their movement to always make sure that they have damage up, and their phases allow them to constantly keep up a dot on a boss as long as they are cycling it out correctly. The big thing to keep in mind with Summoner is that it has a very long rotation. If you want something to where you feel like you are constantly learning new things, you are constantly adding on to your rotation, and you're constantly just dealing damage to a target even if you have to move out of danger's way, Arcanist is probably what you want to go into, and then go into Summoner. Scholar is the exact opposite of this. Scholar is a healer that is all about shield mitigation. They have a pet fairy, which is where they summon a lot of their other abilities that aren't really mitigation based. They have they have two technically mitigation abilities in the fairy's arsenal in the form of the damage debuff that they, or damage down debuff that they get, or damage down buff that they get to give to their allies. And there's also a summon that you get at level 80 that upgrades your fairy to apply shields every single time that it heals on its own. Now, the big thing with Scholar, your fairy will always heal the lowest health target that is within its casting range at that time. You always want to make sure that your fairy is not is always summoned, rather. You always want to make sure that it's out because it is basically a free heal over time on any of your party members while it's out. And it also has a pretty big chunk of your toolkit tied with it as well. Outside of that, as far as the base Scholar goes, a lot of your healing that you do applies a shield to a target. You're not really about burst healing. You have the ability to burst heal, but your main focus is to mitigate damage rather than heal it up. That's really the White Mage's job. In 4-man dungeon content, you want to make sure that your tank stays alive. No matter what you got to do to make sure your tank stays alive, you just got to make sure that you, your tank, your party as a whole, all stay alive. So just use whatever you got to do to make sure that that happens. They have one of the easier AoE abilities in their damage toolkit when there isn't damage that's happening. In the form of Art of War. It's just an instant cast around you AoE. You have to go into melee range to be able to cast this. And it does a considerable amount of damage, even up to 2 targets. So make sure that you are using Art of War when you do not need to be healing anybody in your party. And just make sure that you keep your dot up and you're always casting something as far as a damage or a healing spell goes. Always be casting is a big thing with casters in this game. Outside of that, there are other jobs and other classes that are available to you while you are playing Final Fantasy XIV. Some of them do not get unlocked until you reach the other expansions. Heaven's Ward has access to the Dark Knight, the Machinist, and the Astrologian. They are a tank, a DPS, and a healer, respectively. The Stormblood expansion, don't believe has anything in it that is exclusive to it, I don't believe. There are rogues and ninjas in this game. They are their own thing. If you start in Limsa Lominsa, which the Arcanist and the Marauder both start in Limsa Lominsa. If you once you get the ability to switch your job, you will have the ability to go and pick up Rogue and Limsa Lominsa off of the docks. There is an NPC that will have a blue icon over their head that will say, so you want to be a rogue. And you can unlock Rogue there, and Rogue goes into Ninja. That is a DPS class. Very high APM class as well, also a melee job. If you want to unlock that as well. Excuse me. Samurai was unlocked in Stormblood. That was a class that I was forgetting. Samurai was unlocked in Stormblood, which is also a melee DPS. And in Endwalker, you have access to the Dancer job. so you have access to the Dancer job, which is a ranged DPS that follows along in the footsteps of Machinist and Bard. Uh, Dancer is probably the most utility type DPS that you can play in the game, so if you want to play a more supportive role as a DPS, definitely pick up Dancer. But once all of this is out of the way, your character will be made. Let's just go ahead and let's start as a gladiator so that we can go ahead and start in a game. Go ahead and make your character's name whatever you'd like it to be. Okay, looks like that name is already picked. Let's go ahead and just switch it over. That's already checked as well. Okay. Let me just go ahead and put a name in. There we go. There we are. So once you put your name in, you'll be prompted to go ahead and begin the game with this character. And then you will be in the world of Eorzea. This is going to be a pretty common thing amongst all the servers, folks. A lot of people do play this game. It'll say that there's about 20 players in queue. There will be a certain number of players in queue. This does not take that long. Unless it's up into like the thousands, it's probably only going to take about a minute or two for you to go ahead and get into the game, so just don't worry about this at all. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here, actually. And what we're going to do is we're going to make another video after this explaining what the new player experience is like. So I'm going to go ahead and just end this here, guys. If you like what you saw, please go ahead and check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/Nothrar. And feel free to tune in. Feel free to subscribe. And we will go ahead and get you some more tips. If you have any questions, any concerns about anything to do with the new player experience, please go ahead and ask. I'm more than willing to help anybody out. Hope that y'all have a wonderful day, and take care.